So now that we can receive something, we're going to go back to our app, and when we select a thumbnail that we want to send, we want to upload, we're going to post that. Essentially, we're going to send that via the WebSocket to the server, and then the server is going to store it, do what it does with it, and then we're going to send a response back after that. So we're going to go to our profile, and then here is where the magic's going to happen. So we want to, there's a function that we're going to add to our global. Upload our thumbnail, use global, make sure it's should already be imported. Upload thumbnail, and then when we have our file, we're just going to pass it like that, and that's it. That's all we're going to do here. Pretty simple. And so we're going to receive that object, and we'll go over here, and we're going to have to create that function. We'll create a new section for the thumbnail. And the reason why we're creating this particular function inside of our use global is so that we have access to the socket and all that sort of stuff. And this is going to be the file. And we're going to grab our socket. We're going to call a function called get socket. Now this get function is going to have to come from up here. See, Zustand provides not just a set so that we can set like this, but also a get so that we can get other parameters inside of a function like this. So it's all in the documentation, it's all there. Let's provide that get there, and then we can go get socket, and then we can grab this active socket, which it will be an active socket if we're able to call this function from profile. And then we're going to go socket.send JSON, and then we're going to want to stringify an object. And again, remember I said we can only send text. We can't send, it has to be represented as text. And we're going to tell it from where it came from, because we're going to send lots of these functions. We're going to be able to send lots of different data to the server. We need to tell it where exactly it's coming from, and we're going to do that by specifying a source, like where it originated from. I'm just going to say it's a thumbnail, and we're going to add the base64 encoded image, file.base64, and the file name. Go away. The file name, just so we have a file name. It's capital here. It's annoying, but that's the data that it gives us, and we'll see it in a second when we go to print it out. Actually, let's leave this out for now. We'll leave that out for now, so that when we send it for the first time and we print it out here, it's not going to, the base64 is not going to massively swamp our entire thing. So back to our profile. That looks good. Now we will refresh this, just to make sure that there's nothing, it's going to mess us up. Go to our profile, that, and then we want to pick, I like this one. Yeah, and so that worked. That gave us, that's all of our data that we expected. Now, I made a spelling mistake, silly me, in our consumer. It shouldn't be index, it should be indent. Sorry about that. And then that should fix itself. Put a little gap. And then we'll do the same thing again. Pick an image. That worked again. And then it should print something. No. Try again. make server. So we'll rerun our server. Something seems to have happened. And we'll go to our profile, and we will not print this out anymore because we're confident that we're getting what we expect. In our consumer, we want to print out, our user, and then on receive, we should be receiving. Let's refresh. And the user should be connecting. So all right, it's working again. Now we're going to go back and click here, select the image. There we go. Okay, I'm not sure what happened there. We're receiving the data that we sent, the source, global, source, thumbnail, and then the file name, which is exactly what we're receiving here. So in our consumer, this receive function is called whenever we receive any sort of data at all. And this is only one function that's called. So this is why we need to specify some additional information along with it, like the source, so that we can figure out where, what this message is. And so we basically are sending each other, we're sending dictionaries, and we can put anything that we desire inside those dictionaries. Now that we have all that, we can include our image data, and then we can upload that, and we'll get to that next. Okay. Refresh, open, sweet. Now we can remove this logout. We don't, this printout, we don't need to see that anymore. Global. Here, yep, this. Sweet. Okay, and now we're going to include our thumbnail, our base64 data. So we refresh that, and this is gonna fill up our entire window here when we select an image, but we'll do that and just make sure we are receiving it. This one. Yeah, see, that's our image data sent as a 64 encoded image. Exactly what we expect to see. Goody, goody. Now we're going to close our app. We're going to go to our API because we're going to go to our consumer, and we're going to create. Now we don't have Python doesn't have switch statements, which is what we would like here, but so we're going to have to make something a bit similar because we're going to get lots of different types of requests. We're going to have to sort out where they're going to go right here. So just for now, we're just going to put the first one. We're going to extract the source. And if the data source is our thumbnail, then we're going to put all this function, we're going to put the functionality for each different request into its own function, just for organization purposes. So when we receive a thumbnail request, we're just going to pass the whole data structure there. And we're going to want to grab the user because we're going to be updating the user's thumbnail, and we already have the user. We don't have to do a get or anything like that. We have that user in our scope. So we'll go from there, and we need to convert our base64 encoded data into a file that Django will accept. We're going to have to import these. we need to update the file field on our user model, which we did ages ago. So we need to set that file to this field. An update. We need to import our user serializer. And we do have that. Just grab it from right here. Import that. And now it's been updated, but we need to send it back. So how are we going to do that? So remember I said before that WebSockets allow a bidirectional communication in both directions. So I can send an event from the server to the phone, and the phone can send an event from the phone to the server. And we're going to, when we receive a thumbnail request, which is basically a post of a new thumbnail file, but there are, get, post, patch, these things don't exist in WebSocket world for our purposes, but that's the same thing as what it's doing. It's posting some data to us. So now we want to broadcast this change back to our group, and so we're going to create a function called send group, and we're going to send the group that we're going to send it to is going to be the user name of this consumer, which is set up here. When we connect, it's only being sent to us. It's not being broadcast to anyone else. We'll get to that later when we get to messages, where I want to send a message to my friend. I'm not going to broadcast it to my own group. I'm going to broadcast it to someone else's group. So we'll get to that soon. And we're gonna provide, similar to the source that we provided when we sent something to the server, we're going to provide a source as well when we send something back, so that the phone or the app is going to know what exactly it's receiving. And because we only have one endpoint kind of thing, we need to come up with a different way of doing it. And we're going to also include our data. And that's all. So we're going to create these functions that are going to just broadcast everything that we want. And to broadcast or to send to group is a synchronous function, and we're in asynchronous code right now. So we need to bridge in the same way that we do here. And we just grab that. That's the same thing. Async to sync. Our channel layout, and we're going to go, instead of group add, group send, and it's going to be to our group name, and we're going to reuse this function a lot, and I'll explain why in a moment. And then our response data. Now, the way Django Channels works is when I call this function here, group send, when I send to a group, the type parameter, this needs to be a dictionary, my data here, and then I'll have a type, and that type will, whatever this is here, it will call a function inside this consumer with that same name. So basically, all this is going to call a function called broadcast group. Right here. So it's going to call this function here. But it's only going to be called on the consumers that are attached to this particular group. So at the moment, we're just calling it to ourselves, but later we're going to call someone else's group. So this is, as I said, I'm not going to go too deep into it. It's all in the documentation, go through the tutorial, explains everything. I'm just trying to fly through it and give you enough so that when you read the documentation, you'll be like, oh, that's what he was talking, that's what he was, raving on about. I'm trying to provide enough for you to find your chi on your own. And then from this, we're going to go self.send. Send. Now this is where it's actually going to send the data back to the app. So when send group, it's just sending it to the group, and this self.send function actually send the data along the WebSocket wire. I'm sure it's complicated. It's unfamiliar. I have no doubt about that. And that's why I created this sort of system, is so that we didn't have to, I just wrapped all this up into one function called send group, and then I just send what I need to send, and it just does it, right? So it'll just send it to the group and all the users attached to that group without sort of all this fuss. I just found that running this was much easier than constructing all of this each time, because then you need multiple functions. Yeah, it was an absolute mess. So I tried to keep it as simple as possible. Actually, I'm going to rename all this stuff and call it data because it makes more sense to me. And so this data is always going to contain our type, which is always going to be this, always going to be broadcast group no matter what. It's going to contain a source, which is our where it originated from, which the app is going to need to know, so it knows what to do with the data, and it's going to contain a data. That's all it's going to be. And so before we actually send it, we're only going to send source and data. This type, the only reason this type exists is for this construction, so that basically when we call it, it's going to broadcast it to the correct group. So what we're going to do here is we're going to go data.pop our type. And then now our data, our return data, is just going to be our source and our data. And that's the only thing that the app will ever receive. It will never receive anything other than this. So I just, wanted to make that very, very clear. And if you go through the documentation on channels and you want to know how it works in more depth, this will jump out at you. I have no doubt about that. Well, I hope, And then we save that, and that should work. I'm sure I made a spelling mistake. Nothing visible yet. And so now we are receiving a thumbnail request. We're updating the database, and then we are broadcasting it back to ourselves and a new user object. And we're going to take that user object and we're going to put it into our global store. And we're also going to, and that's going to automatically update our thumbnails in the top corner here. It's going to update this one, and it's going to update this one. It's going to happen instantly, and it's going to be amazing. Socket close. Oh yeah, so the socket closed a couple of times because we saved this file, and then it reran this, and then it, trust me. And then we rerun this again, and then it'll on open, and then it won't close. See, we're open, we're good. No problem. So we need to go to our global, and we need to receive. So on message is where we're going to receive. So we're just going to receive data initially. So we want to get rid of this. So we're just receiving text data. So we saw before, just before we send it, we're dumping it to a JSON, we're stringifying it. And then once we receive it, we're unstringifying it, we're passing it back into a dictionary. And we're receiving an event here. We're going to log it out. I'm going to put in a pretty way, so we can always see all the data that we receive, always. It's going to be very useful for us. And we're going to have lots of different responses. So we could make a switch statement, but it's going to get very, very long and very clunky. And so I am going to make it cleaner, just going to do it this way, trust me. Yeah, trust me, it'll be much, much cleaner than doing it. I actually had it originally as a switch statement. It just took up so much, so much of the page that I was like, oh my God, I need a better way of doing it. And so we're going to have a dictionary of functions. So we're going to map functions to keys, and then we're going to get the function, depending on the source. And remember, we said that the source was the thumbnail. And so you can see that we're going to have a pattern here. Whenever we receive something, it's going to be receive underscore thumbnail. And then whenever we get something back from the server, it's always going to be response underscore, well, not underscore, response something. And then if the response is nothing, so if we try and access an object key that isn't there, or in a switch statement form it would be default nothing, then we're going to basically we're going to say there's an error. I'm going to print out a nice little error for us here, and it will just tell us if we spell the source wrong or something like that. Return and breakaway, we don't want to do anything else, so we're essentially guarding against that. And then we're going to call our response function. And this just cleans it up a lot. Okay, and then outside of our use global up here, because we don't need to access them inside of our use global, we could put them in there and we could go get, yeah, we could put them in there and go, we could use our get dot and then get it like that if it was inside, but we don't need to put it inside. We don't need to muddy it. We can just drop it outside. We're going to have a whole section. And we'll take this here. We'll make a section that's outside. And that's why we're passing in set and get. And what we're receiving is just our user. So all we need to do, very, very simple, is we're just going to update our user. User equals data. And that's all we need to do for the moment. Now, it's not actually going to display anything yet, unfortunately, because if we go to our image, we're just setting the profile image as our asset profile image that we've got here. So nothing's going to happen yet. So the way we're going to handle that is we're going to, in our utils, we're going to make a new function called thumbnail. And we're going to pass a URL of some sort. And if the URL is null, which the thumbnail for a user could be null, it may not have been set yet at all. In that case, we're going to return this profile image. We're going to return that. And we're going to import that here. And we're going to have to, it's going to be out, assets, profile.png. And then we're going to return that. If not, address, we're going to have to import the address, which was this without the HTTP or anything like that. And then our URL. And that's it. And we're going to place this here. So now we've got, now our utils is going to have an additional function. So we'll save that, come back to our profile, and we'll get rid of this altogether. And in our source, we'll go utils import thumbnail user.thumbnail. And we don't have our user yet, so we'll have to grab that from our global user, and that should be it. That should work now. Let's give it a crack. Oh, it's an error. Read-only file system media. We might have to make a media folder. So disconnect from that, and then in our API, from here, from the root, we just go make dir API media, and we'll rerun. And we'll try again. We're going to reload because our socket closed, so we'll reload. It's open, profile, an image. There's one thing we definitely do need to do on our URLs. We need to add the ability for our. We need to be able to serve our media files from this application when it hits the media URL, the media root, and all that sort of stuff. We import the settings. Static, we're going to need to import static as well. Rerun. Try again. Nope. Read only. Ah, that's why. Should be media URL. Now, yep, that's reloaded. Try this again. Select thumbnail. There we go. How good does that look? Oh, looks amazing. And now we're going to add this one as well. So we're going to create a thumbnail object. We're going to create a common object. So come to our app, go to our source, common. In here, we're going to create a new file called thumbnail. And we're basically just going to wrap up this thing. And we'll close some of this rubbish. that. Move image. Import thumbnail, and then it's just going to be URL equals user.thumbnail, and the size was money. Save that. Shouldn't have changed. Yep, pretty sure that's still good. And we're going to take this thumbnail and we're going to go to our home. And here, this image here, we're going to wipe that out, replace it with our new thumbnail. And we need to make sure it's imported like that. And we need to grab our user. Grab our user. Got it there. And this was 28. Save that. And now we've got it up here as well. How good! And then if we reload everything, log back into our app, we've got our little thumbnail up there, go to our profile page, and it's all working. It's all sweet. Okay, that was a mission, and we can see that it's to fetch our thumbnail, it's doing a HTTP request to get that. So that doesn't, that's why we had to add the settings, URLs. That's why we had to add this, so that it would serve when we go / media, that it would actually grab our file, so / media / thumbnails, it'll grab our file from here, media. This media thumbnails, this is where our files live. So it's been uploaded to our API. Now in the real world, you would probably want to use S3, Django storages, something like this. You wouldn't, I mean, unless you were game, you probably wouldn't want to store your, your media files on your server itself. You'd want to farm that out to some sort of service. But in development, this is the way. This is, I mean, this is enough for us. You know what I mean? Like we're just focusing on the WebSocket channels type of stuff. And if you want me to make a tutorial all about that, S3, yada yada yada, let me know in the comments. How good does that look? Now we're going to get to our search. We're going to search for users. We're going to search for our friends. We've got 2 users here. We're going to create a few more. We're going to give them some thumbnails, and then we're going to start searching through them, and then we're going to be able to send them a request, and then we're going to be able to accept their request, and then we'll be able to send messages to and from. Now, we've made it so far now. Stick with it. It's all starting to come together now. Now is the easy part. We don't have to install any new packages. We don't have to do any more setup. We can just write a little bit of Django and write the rest of our responses and our receive functions in our consumer. We're going to write out a couple more of these. It's probably about 10 different ones we're going to write out, and that's pretty much it. And it's all going to come together. It's all going to be incredible. So stick around for that.